The next morning, Hanchard went to the magistrate's court as mayor. He was the chief magistrate in Casterbridge. There was one case only, and the offender stood before him. She was an old woman, dirty and poorly dressed, but strangely, she wore a large apron that had once quite clearly been white. She was not a local woman. She looked at Hanchard and the second magistrate, and Hanchard looked at her with a short pause, as if she had reminded him vaguely of somebody or something, which passed from his mind as quickly as it had come. Oh well, and what has she been doing? She is charged, sir, with the offence of being disorderly and drunk, said the constable. Where did she do that? Asked the other magistrate. By the church, sir. The policeman gave his evidence, and then it was her turn to answer. Henchard asked her if she had any questions or anything to say. Yes, she replied. 20 years ago, I was selling furmity in a tent at Weddon Prayers Fair. Henchard stared. A man and a woman with a little child came into my tent. The woman continued. They sat down and had a bowl each. I put rum in the man's, and then he had more and more, until at last he quarrelled with his wife and offered to sell her to the highest bidder. A sailor came in and bid 5 guineas and paid the money and led her away. And the man who sold his wife in that way is the man sitting there in that great big chair. The speaker ended by nodding her head at Henchard and folding her arms. Everybody looked at Henchard. His face was very pale, as if it had been covered in ashes. We don't want to hear your life and adventures, said the second magistrate sharply, filling the pause which followed. You have been asked if you have anything to say about the charges against you. This shows that he is no better than I and has no right to sit there in the judgment upon me. It's a false story, said the same magistrate, so hold your tongue. No, it's true. The words came from Henchard. It's as true as the light, he said slowly, and it does prove that I am no better than she, and so that I do not treat her hard for revenge. I leave her to you. Everyone began to talk about what they had just heard. Hanchard left the chief magistrate's chair and came out, passing through a group of people on the steps. It seemed that the old furmity woman had hinted to everyone she had met since her arrival in Casterbridge that she knew a few things about their great local man, Mr. Hanchard. Why is there such a crowd around the courthouse today? Said Lucetta to her servant soon afterwards. Oh, ma'am, it's this story about Mr. Henchard. A woman has proved that before he became a gentleman, he sold his wife for 5 guineas in a tent at a fair. In all the accounts that Henchard had given her of the separation from his wife Susan for so many years, of his belief in her death, and so on, he had never clearly explained the real cause of that separation. That story she now heard for the first time. A terrible misery spread through Lucetta as she thought about the promise she had been forced to make the night before. This was the man Hanchard really was. He was terrible. that she would soon herself marry a man who had sold his wife. Lucetta decided she must have a break from Casterbridge at once. After making a few arrangements and visiting certain people, she told Elizabeth Jane that she planned to go to Port Brady by the seaside for a few days. Casterbridge was so gloomy. A few days later, Hanchard called at High Place Hall, only to be told that no one was at home. The servant said the mistress was returning that day from Port Brady, so Hanchard decided to go to meet her. Dear Lucetta, I have been very anxious to see you, he said as they walked slowly back to Casterbridge. I have thought over the way I got your promise that night. I don't want to make you suffer, and to marry me just now would clearly do that. Therefore, I agree to put off all thought of marriage for a year or two. But perhaps I can help you in some way, said Lucetta. Surely I can do something in return for your goodness, something practical. I have money now. Hanchard remained in thought. He had not expected this. There is one thing you might do, Lucetta, he said. Then what is it? She asked, looking worried. You may have heard that I have been unlucky this year. I did what I have never done before. I gambled rashly and I lost. You wish me to lend you some money? No, said Hanchard, almost angrily. I'll not borrow from a woman, even though she may be so nearly my own as you. No, Lucetta, what you can do is this, and it would save me. I owe most to Mr. Grover, but if he would only wait another fortnight, I could repay him. Now, if you were to let him know that you mean to marry me in the next fortnight. Now, stop. You haven't heard all. Make him believe this, though of course our engagement will really be a long one. Nobody else need know. We'll ask him to keep it secret. He'll willingly wait for his money then, and by the end of the fortnight I shall have the money anyway, and then I can coolly tell him we have decided to wait a year or two. Not a person in the town need know how you have helped me. Since you wish to be of use, there's your way. Hancher did not notice the result of his words on Lucetta until he had finished. If it were anything else, she began, and the dryness of her lips could be heard in her voice. But it is such a little thing, he said, less than you have offered, just the beginning of what you have so lately promised. It is not because I want, it is because I absolutely can't, she said with rising distress. I cannot. Why not? Because he was a witness. A witness? Witness to what? Mr. Grover was a witness to my marriage. Marriage? Yes, with Mr. Farfrae. Oh, Michael, I am already his wife. We were married this week at Port Brady. Mr. Grover was a witness because he happened to be in Port Brady at the time. Hanchard stood quite still. Married to him, he said at last. You married him while you were engaged to marry me. It was like this, she explained with tears in her eyes. I loved him so much, and I thought you might tell him of the past. And then, when I had promised you, I learned of the rumor that you had sold your first wife at a fair like a horse. or cow. How could I keep my promise after hearing that? I could not risk myself in your hands. It would have been dreadful to take your name after such a scandal. But I knew I would lose Donald if I did not marry him at once, for you would carry out your threat of telling him of our former relationship. But you will not do so now, will you, Michael? For it's too late to separate us. Oh, you false woman! You promised me, burst out Hencher. Michael, pity me and be generous. You don't deserve pity. You did, but you don't now. I'll help you to pay off your debt. I will never be in debt to Farfrae's wife. Never. Don't stay with me any longer. I shall say something worse. Go. Elizabeth Jean was sitting in her room by the window when Lucetta told her the news. She could hear the church bells ringing and had wondered why. Now she knew they were ringing for Lucetta's marriage to Donald Farfrae. Elizabeth Jane no longer wished to stay in that house. She decided that she must go at once. It was still early in the evening when she quickly put on her things and went out. She soon found a suitable room to rent and arranged to move there that same night. Returning quietly to High Place Hall, she quickly wrote a note for Lucetta. Then, changing into her plainest clothes, she departed, carrying her few things with her. Lucetta, sitting in the sitting room with Donald, had no idea she had gone.
Hey there. Subscribe to my channel. And also press this bell icon.